Okay, so let's begin. Welcome to another session of Lunch and Learn. I'm always feel that it's an honor, and I don't want to say pride, but I feel a certain amount of connection because we've been in Tallahassee so often. The fact that we're able to do this that I'm able to do this from time to time, I find it quite moving. In any case, the title was "The Jewish Nation Always on the Move." How do we get there? In a very interesting and kind of roundabout way. This week's portion is called Truma. Truma means literally contribution or donation. Up until now, we've from the beginning of Genesis until now, we've had what are called, in quotation marks, interesting portions. Genesis, the creation, the flood, the three patriarchs, the going to Egypt, and then in Shemot, the book of Exodus, the whole story of slavery and the redemption from slavery, and the splitting of the Red Sea, which actually is in the misnomer is the Reed Sea, and giving the Ten Commandments. So those are interesting. Then suddenly now we come to something completely different, like falling off a cliff from this highly illustrative and interesting historical narrative. We come to last week a full portion of civil laws. So we say, okay, civil laws, in order to have a moral and just society, we need the civil laws. Okay, there's room for them. But now we come to 5 portions talking about the tabernacle or sanctuary. And that's a little bit odd. First of all, why does the Torah go into so much detail that it needs 5 full portions to give us the laws? More so, the tabernacle, the sanctuary in the desert, was temporary. We had the tabernacle up until the time of the temple, the first temple, which Solomon built. So why go into all this detail about something that is not permanent, temporary? So for quite a while, these portions have been kind of defined as being dull. But that's until Chassidut came along. With Chassidut, we can delve into it and what's behind the meanings of some of these things. And that's very applicable to this week's portion. In any case, Truma, the commandment in the beginning of Truma is to build a sanctuary, a tabernacle. And Truma explains the items, the vessels that have to be built. And some of them are small, some of them are larger. Among the ones that are defined what to build and exactly how to build them is the Holy Ark. There's another name for it. I don't remember what it is in English, but the Ark in which the Torah was kept, the not only Torah, the Ten Commandments and the Torah. We'll get that in a minute. The altar, which was used for the sacrifices, and the table, which is for the in English, I think it was called the showbread. But we want to concentrate on the ark, the Holy Ark. I think it's called the Ark of the Covenant, if I remember correctly in English.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so of all the items that were in the sanctuary, the Holy Ark was the most holy. Why? Because it contained, first of all, it contained the 2 tablets of the Ten Commandments. Incidentally, it's generally accepted, not accepted, depicted that the tablets, the tops are rounded. But the Gemara says specifically that they were square or rectangular. It gives the dimensions. There's it could be interesting one day to just go into the whole idea of the Ark and tablets, the history, how it was there was captured by the Philistines, and the Philistines suffered a plague and eventually returned. It's a long story. It could be something very interesting in the future. In any case, the Holy Ark was placed in the Holy of Holies, which is the innermost sanctuary within the tabernacle, in which only the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, would enter there and on Yom Kippur. And so there we have a convergence of the three items converging into the epitome of holiness. We have the Ark, which is the most holy. We have the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who is the highest of the most holy of in the hierarchy of priests. And um, and then we have we have the Ark in the Holy of Holies and with the Kohen Gadol. So in one year the three come together, and that's the epitome on Yom Kippur of holiness within our physical world. As a side note, what happened to the Ark? Where is it today? The historians debate, and the last mention of it was in the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE. But it says, I don't remember where, if it's in the Gemara or in the Tanakh, that King Solomon, when he built the first temple, he dug caverns so that the holy objects could, if necessary, be hidden on the Temple Mount. So it's very possible, in my opinion, it's even very likely, that the Holy Ark today is in the Temple Mount, somewhere under the Dome of the Rock, or Al-Aqsa. Excuse me, 1 minute. In other words, that the Ark with the Ten Commandments and the Torah scroll written by Moses and a jar containing manna is all up on the mountain. Of course, we can't excavate it, but it could very well be that that the Holy Ark is still up there, and not that it was either captured or destroyed by the Babylonians. In any case, the Holy Ark is described in um, our portion in chapter 25 because the dimensions, the size, the length, the width, the height. And then we come to three interesting verses. Chapter 25, verse 12 says, you must cast 4 gold rings, in other words, like discs or loops, and place them on its 4 corners, 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the opposite side. Now, why? The next verse, verse 13 says, you must make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Okay, so now we have rings attached to the ark. And we have poles. What do we do with them? Verse 14, you must insert the poles through the rings on the sides of the ark so that the ark can be carried with them. With them, in other words, by them. Okay, makes sense. The ark is heavy, it's bulky, be difficult to lift. And so God commanded that we have poles that you pick it up and walk with it or travel with it. Now, why? Why do we need the poles? Well, as we mentioned before, the tabernacle, the sanctuary, was temporary. It was mobile and had to be transported sometimes at short notice. In fact, in the 40 years that the Jewish nation was in the desert, there were 42 encampments. Each time, those 42 encampments, the tabernacle had to be dismantled, carried to its new location, and then reassembled. Now, some of the encampments were quite short. The longest one was 19 years. In other words, in 19 years, the ark sat in the sanctuary without being removed. So now we come to the next verse, verse 15, which tells something very strange. Verse 15, the poles must remain in the rings of the ark. They may not be removed from it. And the halacha is, as mentioned in the Talmud and Rashi, never, never, ever are the poles allowed to be removed from the ark. It's a negative commandment. Do not remove the poles from the ark. But why? Even more so, the table and the altar also had poles. There's no prohibition of removing the poles there. When you have to carry it, you carry it. When it's stationary, you remove the poles, you put the poles up in the attic. When it comes time to move, you take the poles, insert them, and carry it. Why is it a commandment not to remove the poles from the ark? And if we say, okay, during the 40 years in the desert, there were quite a few travels. So, well, what happened afterwards? The ark was eventually in Shiloh, and then for 381 years in the first temple, and the poles weren't removed. Nobody moved. The ark was not moved at all during those 381 years, and the poles remained attached. So, why? And there are a number of explanations. We'll go into some very shortly. And with this, we can get to the nitty-gritty of the whole idea of Am Yisrael, the Jewish nation, always on the move. A few things that suggestions that are made. The Rambam said that the ark is so holy that we don't want to change anything. We touch it as little as possible. Another explanation that the poles are tight. They're exactly, and if you take them out, put them in, they become loose. And by being tight, it's easier to pick it up and carry it. Others say we don't want to disturb it. But again, this is a little bit problematic because if those reasons are valid, then what about the other vessels that had poles and the poles were removed? So now we come to understanding why. There's a book here called Sefer HaChinuch, written in the 13th century in Spain. The author is anonymous. He's only known as the Levite of Barcelona. The story is, the way I understand it, that he wanted to teach his son the mitzvot. And so he compiled the 613 seminal mitzvot. He wasn't the first to do it, but Maimonides had done that about 200 years earlier. There were a few very, very slight discrepancies between the two lists of 613 seminal mitzvot. But mitzvah number 96 is exactly what we're talking about. Not to remove the poles. Now, I didn't find a translation, so I'll translate. Like I said last time, I'm not very good at translating, so please bear with me. The idea of not removing the poles is because we may have to move the ark either from place to place, or very important, or due to a war, or any other reason. Now, why is this? And he talks about the kavod, the honor, the importance of the honoring the ark. He writes like this, and therefore we were commanded not to remove the poles from the ark, because we may have to go out with the ark from one place to another place very quickly. And maybe with the dealing and the taking the trouble to put the poles in and put the poles out and doing it quickly, that we won't check it carefully, and it may slip from our hands, which is, of course, the opposite of honoring it. But since it was always ready to be moved, then there was no possibility of a mishap happening. So this is what the Sefer Chinuch tells us is behind. Yeah, in other words, um, okay, it's holy. We have to be careful. He gives a very down-to-earth reason for, um, for um, but still it comes a little bit questioning. Once we had the temple, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem that Solomon built, 381 years we knew it was not going to be moved. Why still can't we move the poles? There must be something deeper. There must be another reason for it. And the reason is, now, with all that as an introduction, the reason is that the ark has to be ready to be moved, sometimes at a moment's notice, sometimes for the purpose of war. Um, we won't go into the purpose of removing the ark for war. Like I said, it could be a very interesting topic for in the future. As we're going deeper, the Sefer HaChinuch gives another reason that says that each of the items, vessels in the temple, excuse me, had a very specific dimensions because there's a certain attachment, the inner part, the inner soul of the Jew to these vessels, which causes him or reveals to him certain powers that will enhance, not only enhance the person, but he'll act properly. Um, so that's the second reason that the chinuch brings. But that's a very spiritual thing. We want something down to earth. And to that end, there's a commentary which now we can understand why the poles were not removed by the Netziv. The Netziv was Rabbi Berlin. I think he lived 150, 200 years ago, something like that. He writes like this. Here I do have the translation into English. This commandment of not removing the poles from the ark is telling us that the power of the ark is the Torah. It was not only the ark itself, but the Torah that was placed inside the ark. And it, the ark and the Torah, is carried generation after generation from place to place wherever Jews are exiled. And he goes on further. This is unlike the table, which we mentioned before. The table which represents the kingship of Israel. I'm not exactly sure why. We didn't have a chance to look it up. But the table, he says, represents the kingship, Malchut, the kingship of Israel. And the altar represents the priesthood, because it was the priests, the Kohanim, who did the services. Because those two powers, the kingship and the priesthood, exist only when the Jews are home in the land of Israel. Not so the Torah. The Torah is not, I don't want to say confined, is not limited to only to Eretz Yisrael. And that is, wherever the Jews go, the Torah goes. For 2,000 years, Jews have been on the move, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes expelled. I mean, the Jews were expelled at a minute's notice from Spain, from England, from France, from Germany, in 1948 from the Arab countries. Wherever they went, they took the Torah with them. And that is the idea between the Jewish nation, always on the move. For 2,000 years we're on the move, 2,000 years we take the Torah with us, because it's not a geographical limitation. It's not limited to any location. Um, God is everywhere. The Torah is everywhere. In the next few minutes, I just want to quickly bring in another few things. The Rebbe gives another insight. We said that the place of the ark is the Holy of Holies. Now, a Jew can come and say, "Well, leave it. I keep mitzvot. I learn Torah. I'm good. I'm a good person. I'm a tzaddik, whatever it is. I have my sanctuary. Leave me alone. The walls of a ghetto. I have my existence. I don't nothing else. I don't need anything else. I'm not interested in anything else." Rebbe says, no. The ark, even when it was in the temple for 381 years, had poles. Why? Because it had to be movable. It had to be able to be brought outside. Nobody can confine himself to his own strict environment. The purpose of a Jew, the duty of a Jew, is to go out, to help others, to care for others, be involved with others. There's no such thing as being secluded in your own holy of holies. And just want to bring in very quickly a few stories. The German poet Heinrich Heine was Jewish. He converted to Christianity in order to get into university. Interesting, even though he converted, Hitler, Yamach Shmo, did not allow, he probably burnt his books. After he was in the university, after he had converted, his friend said to him, well, the Jews, they're nothing. They don't even have a homeland. They don't have anything. And even though he had converted, he said, no, that's not true. The Torah is their homeland. In 1990, the Dalai Lama, is that how you pronounce it? Was exiled from Tibet. He was in India. He said, how am I going to keep my identity being exiled from Tibet? And so he invited a group of Jewish scholars to come and help him explain. And last but not least, I want to read a letter that the rabbi received. Remember, was it 3 or 4 years ago? I think it was the spring of 2022 that the Chabad house burnt down, and the two Torah scrolls were burned and had to be buried. The pictures of those two Torah scrolls were has publicized all through Chabad, and many outlets, whether it was television or newspapers or whatever, certainly in Florida, and quite a number of other places. Anyway, the rabbi received a letter, and while I was preparing this, I remembered the letter. I found it, and I'd like to read it. It's anonymous, and the letter reads like this. I studied at a university, this is talking about in America, of course. I studied at a university with a large Jewish student body. Very few were what would be called observant. But we had a Torah scroll that had been rescued from a synagogue during the Holocaust, and which was painstakingly restored in the displaced persons camps scattered throughout Europe. I don't know how it ended up at our university. Few of us knew Hebrew or could read or understand what was written, but that Torah scroll was the pride of the entire Jewish student body, the one thing we all had in common and could all relate to, and we all treasured it. These pictures, the pictures of the burnt Torah scrolls, these pictures brought back memories of those college days. More importantly, they reminded me of the true value of a Torah scroll. I just wanted to share these thoughts with you, and after you have replaced them, I am sure you will give the new ones the honor they deserve. And so that, in a nutshell, is the Jewish nation always on the move. As long as we have the Torah with us, we're at home. As long as we have the Torah with us, we're always on the move. Even when we're stationary, we move. We can, if not physically from one place to another, we can be uplifted, move up. But this, and where do we learn this from, or where is it emphasized? In the fact that the Holy Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, the poles which made it mobile were never allowed to be removed. The chances are that if one day we discover the Holy Ark, and if it's really buried or hidden, I don't say buried, it's hidden somewhere in the caverns that King Solomon dug on the Temple Mount, I have no doubts that we'll still find the poles inserted in those rings. So, if anybody wants to add, if anybody wants to ask questions, make comments, anything, be very happy
Why
to
haven't we
yes.
excavated the Temple Mount to recover the Ark of the Covenant?
Oh, well, the chances are that it's under the mount of the Dome of the Rock. So we'll wait until Mashiach comes, and then we won't have any problems finding it.
Aren't there
There are
excavations going
well,
on right now at the Temple
well,
Mount?
there are excavations, not so much on the Temple Mount as much as around the Temple Mount. In fact, there were places that they wanted to, a number of years ago, that the archaeologists wanted to excavate, and the Waqf, the authority that maintains the Temple Mount from the Islamic side, they brought in bulldozers to cover it, so we shouldn't be able to. It's very, very interesting the amount of discoveries that have been made. And one, just very quickly, what we discovered, if you're ever in Jerusalem and you go to the Temple Mount, you have to go on the tour of the excavations underneath the wall. It's fascinating, fascinating. When just after 1967, there's this thing called Seder Korban Pesach, that explains how the Pesach sacrifice was made. And the sacrifice was, it's a dirty business. How do they clean the business? It said that they had a stream of water running through. They would close the outlet to make like kind of a dam. It would overflow. It would accumulate all the blood. They would open it, and all the blood would run out into the valley of Kishron. In 1967, or 68, shortly after the Six-Day War, when we were having access. They did excavations there. And after 2,000 years, when they excavated, they were able to find, detect, it's like kind of like a DNA, detect that there had been blood on in the valley. It's no, it's just amazing, the archaeological findings and the verification of things that have been written in the Bible and in the Talmud, in the prophets. Uh, Mind-boggling. But at the moment, to try to dig on the Temple Mount, I don't think anybody, aside from the halachic limitations, I don't think anybody wants to get into that kind of into it.
But they excavated behind the,
Mm.
the wall itself.
Yes, yes, there they have. It's again all around and underneath, but not digging from down within on top of the Temple Mount. Maybe we'll make that the topic of the next time that I have the privilege
Well,
of
thank
a
you so
session.
much.
Mm. Okay, thank you. Thank you all for participating. And most important, stay healthy and keep well.
Thank you. This is
Thank you,
good.
Rabbi.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Hope to see you soon.
Bezrat Hashem.